Welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the wonderful world of wine. How are you, Kim?
I'm wonderful. How are you, Mark?
Everything is great. We are so excited today to have a very special guest on the show, Karen MacNeil. Karen, how are you today?
I'm great, Kim and Mark. Nice to hear your voice.
We are so happy to have you. And many in the wine world know Karen, but for our listeners who don't, I just want to give a huge intro to you, Karen. Karen is the only American to have won every major wine award given in the English language, including the James Beard Award. Time magazine called her America's Missionary of the Vine. Karen has also been named one of the 100 most influential people in wine. She's the author of the Wine Bible and in the past was on PBS for a great food and wine show called Wine, Food, and Friends. So welcome again, Karen. It's a lot to say, and I don't know anyone out there in the wine world who doesn't know you, so we're so excited to talk to you.
Thank you.
First, let's discuss your book. It is in the third edition. It's called The Wine Bible. The third edition is beautiful. It's in color now. Absolutely love it. It was the top 5 best-selling wine book in history. It is the best-selling American book on wine, and it's now sold over 1 million copies. That's huge. Tell us first how you went from being a food writer to an award-winning wine writer, and how do you capture the whole wine world in one book?
The answer to both is it's not easy. Let me talk about capturing the whole world of wine. You know, what makes the Wine Bible unique, and it certainly was true when the first edition came out in the early 2000s, is that the book is not only about wine. As you know, it's sort of threaded through with culture and history and art and fascinating facts and food. And so to capture that in all of that, the whole wine in its incredibly rich context in one book is hard. Any writer will tell you that the hardest part is figuring out what to leave out. And by the third edition, it actually got more difficult because even though I thought I was an even better writer, but it got more difficult because there were more places. All of a sudden, you know, there was a chapter on China and a chapter on Great Britain and places that would not have been thought about 20 or 30 years ago as potentially wine regions. So Bordeaux wasn't happy that it had to get a smaller chapter. And not just Bordeaux, of course. It's a challenge. And it's maybe understanding the relative weight and importance of different topics is probably a writer's greatest talent in a way, because I can, you know, whenever I'm writing a chapter, I'm drinking only the wines from that chapter, if I can. So, you know, I remember when I was writing about Brunello di Montalcino, I thought, oh my God, Brunello di Montalcino, I could write 5,000 pages on this. It's such a great wine. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, if Brunello di Montalcino is 5,000 pages, how big should Champagne be? 20,000 pages, right? So it's emotionally hard to make the cut, so to speak. And how did I go from being a food writer to writing about wine? Well, as many of your listeners, I'm sure, would agree, wine is a food. And if not a food exactly, certainly wine and food have been married for 8,000 years, which is wine's history. The Italians have a great way of phrasing this. When someone drinks a little too much in Italy, they don't say he's drunk too much. They say he hasn't had enough food yet.
I need to use that one.
It's good, right?
It is good.
But flavor, in all honesty, if you love flavor, then you love flavor. It doesn't make any difference if it's solid or liquid. In fact, you sometimes hear people say, "Oh, I'm a food person. I don't know anything about wine." But actually, that cannot be true because the brain doesn't make a distinction between solid flavor and liquid flavor. For the brain, flavor is just flavor. It doesn't matter if it comes in solidly or liquidly. So I believe that going from food writing to wine writing was, from a writer's perspective, not a surprising thing to do. The hard part is learning about wine, having enough sheer tasting experiences that you feel like you know what you're doing.
Right.
One of the really nice things I have found about your book is that not only is it very well organized, so people can find whatever topic they're looking for, but it gives you that kind of personal feel. I think, like you were just saying, about you need to have a lot of tasting experience in order to really understand a wine, I think. And you've found a way to really put that experience into words. And I know that as a wine educator, your book is one of the resources that we usually direct our students towards. And we always get such great feedback about, oh, this helped me pass such and such of an exam because of this section and things like that. So it really is quite a wonderful tool as an educator to be able to have a book like this to recommend to our students.
Thank you. I think one of the secrets to that, Kim, is that I'm genuinely fascinated by every little aspect of wine and the culture that surrounds it. So sprinkled through the Wine Bible heavily are all of these little asides that, to me, make wine come alive.
Yep.
So there you are reading along, and how many sheep are there for every winemaker in New Zealand? It's in the Wine Bible, right? I mean, but it's little fascinating tidbits like that that make reading about wine fascinating and special and take it out of the world of just dry regulations after regulations about what percentage of Tempranillo needs to be in every Rioja.
You talked about how you revise the editions and some of the things that you look at. What do you feel is the best way for anybody in the wine world, not just writers like yourself, to discover what's trending in the wine world? Is there certain resources that you'll go to? I know for our show, every day I'm looking at Googling wine stories, wine trends. Is that the same for a writer like yourself to find what's going on in the wine world?
Yes and no. I mean, one of the things I love about wine is it's essentially untrendy. It's agriculture, and agriculture happens, in fact, it's a subset of agriculture, viticulture, and viticulture happens very slowly. If you were to move here to the Napa Valley where I live and start a vineyard tomorrow and make Cabernet Sauvignon, you would come out with your first product 8 to 10 years from now, probably 10 years from now. So when you're in a world that is so highly specific and where the product requires an enormous amount of agricultural understanding and then fermentation science and then aging before you can even produce a product, you can't really switch gears fast enough to be trendy. And once you do make that Cabernet Sauvignon after 10 years, even if rosé gets very hip, you're not going to switch over because you can't. It would be another number of years. So there's that. I mean, I think in terms of wine drinking, there are things that come and go that are fun, that have to do with modern culture. But at its heart, wine is attached to the earth. I mean, both literally, but also sort of metaphysically. I love the fact that it is an immutable, dependable, beautiful expression of the constancy of nature.
Yeah, well spoken.
I wasn't expecting so much poetry, I guess, associated, but I guess I should, considering all of the beautiful ways you use to describe wine and the places and the people in your book. I had a question about, it's kind of jumping off of that, but more about, you had mentioned before when you were talking about Brunello about having some sections have to be a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, depending on their impact. Are you primarily focused on the American wine drinker, or did you try to take a little bit more of like a global look at what is being consumed, what is quote unquote important in the wine world? I guess I'm just sort of curious about who you were speaking to.
I do try to be as broad a generalist as is possible and still be well grounded in what I know.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder today than it used to be, just as I was saying earlier, because there are so many more places. And in fact, there are so many more places that a little bit like medicine, right? There are very few general practitioner doctors left. Almost everybody's a specialist. And that's true in wine as well. And some days I think to myself, oh, I should just be, I don't know, a specialist in California Pinot Noir or something you could really get your hands around. But I feel like you want to tackle the world. Some woman's got to do it. And I decided it would be me, or I would be one of the women tackling the wine world anyway. Part of knowing a bit about every wine region is also understanding the role wine plays in the lives of people in that place. So whenever I am in a wine region doing research, I'm not only researching the wine itself and of course tasting wines and writing about them, but I'm trying as hard as I can to absorb every single thing I can about the culture, the people there, how they think about wine, what they drink, what they eat when they drink wine, what they do when they drink wine. I remember as a young wine journalist deciding to go to a bullfight in Spain, in Madrid, and take the cheap seats, by the way, because they were the cheap seats. And, you know, sitting there with 1,000 Spanish men smoking cigars, drinking Rioja, and screaming in joy at a bullfight. I mean, I might never go back again because I'm sad for the bull. But my point is that wine exists in a culture and in the behavioral practices of people. And to make wine come alive, you have to try and get close to that.
Karen, you mentioned your book and how you have the fundamentals, you go real deep into regions, you have the fun tips. How would you feel a wine educator, wine lover should approach your book versus someone who's new to wine? Do you think that someone who has, like the younger generation seems to not be into wine, is your book something someone in the younger generation could pick up and get excited about wine? Do you feel that about the book or how people should use the book? And what is your best story you've heard about people reading your book? Like, do winemakers tell you, why'd you leave me out? Or I love the book. Like, do you get feedback like that?
Every time we do a new edition of the Wine Bible, we also do a social media contest called the Best Loved Wine Bible, where people send us photos of their wine Bible with spaghetti stains and dog-eared and post-it marked and torn up because the Italian chapter was taken on the trip to Italy. And then the most loved, quote unquote, wine Bible, we send them a brand new copy, the new next edition. So the very first time we ran this contest, the photos that came in were so heartwarming. How did people read the wine Bible? I mean, there were pictures of the wine Bible beside the bathtub with bubbles in the bathtub. There were torn up pieces. You could tell that people just opened the book anywhere. And that's my goal as a writer. I don't want you to have to read from page 1 to page 700. You should be able to open the book on any page, spend 20 seconds and read something that is both easy to read, but also that gives you the reaction, what is called in television an id not. I didn't know that. And I love it when I go to someone's house and they say things like, wow, did you realize that da 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 is true? That makes me so happy because it's those kinds of little tidbits that over time engage people. And of course, once someone is engaged with wine, it's only a matter of time usually before they're madly in love with it.
Yeah, it must be exciting to get feedback like that. after all the hard work you put into it and the
And
acceptance.
unpaid years.
Yeah.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Kim and Mark, with our special guest today, Karen MacNeil. You can learn more about Mark at his website, franklinliquors.com, and more about myself at commonwealthwineschool.com. Karen's information can be found at karenmacneil.com as well as winespeed.com. We are supported by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Welcome back, everyone, and today we are speaking with our special guest, Karen MacNeil, about her book, The Wine Bible, kind of our number one go-to source for wine education for our students, but also just for a vast array of information and knowledge in the wine world. So we've been talking mostly about your book, Karen. I wanted to ask a question because I know that you do a lot of things with the public and wine tastings and wine tours and travel. What is one of the questions that you get asked the most frequently from wine enthusiasts, whether it has to do with your book or not? Just, I'm sure you get lots of the same questions over and over and over again.
Yes. I suppose the question I get asked the most is if I have a favorite wine. And the second question is probably goes something like this. I have this bottle of wine at home. It's a da-da-da-da-da. When will it be ready to drink? So the answers are when you taste 2,000 to 3,000 wines a year, as I do, you cannot have a favorite. You have to approach every wine with an open mind and develop a love for all kinds of wines all over the world. So while I don't have a favorite wine, I do drink a glass of champagne every night just for good measure. And when is the wine ready? Wine is not a cake. There is no moment in time when it's ready. In fact, there's among the myths about wine is this idea that there's one moment that if you only have this wine at just this one perfect moment, this incredible explosion is going to happen and you're going to have this epiphany. But if you think about why is wine sold in cases? Right? Who invented cases? Why is wine sold in cases? I've probably researched that more than the average bear, and I can tell you no one knows exactly why the number 12. But one thing we do know is that the premise of buying wine originally was to buy several bottles of a wine so that you could experience it at different times in its life and different times in your life. And to this day, that's a fascinating thing to do. So when I suppose in the beginning, we all want to taste just as many different kinds of wine as possible. But if you turn the binoculars around, at least with some wines, you should try buying 3 or 4 or half a dozen bottles of a wine you like so that you really can watch it over time.
That's great advice. An interesting point about the cake. Never thought of that myself. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, Karen, we just started a new year. Sober October has passed. Dry January has passed. In May of 2024, you started Come Over October. And I'd like you to tell our listeners about this and how your comment of why I hate Dry January went viral last year.
Yes. Come Over October is now an annual event. Come this October, it will be Come Over October 2025. And it's based on a very simple, ancient idea. And that is that wine has always been a beverage that brings people together. It's a communal beverage. One of the reasons it comes in a 750 milliliter bottle is because it's about 2.5 glasses for a minimum community, which is 2 people. And so everyone, I think, who's a wine drinker has had the experience of sharing wine with someone who was a stranger when they began, but now an hour later, after some wine, is a friend. Wine has been the beverage of Judeo-Christian religions, in part because of its ability to bind us together, to make us friends, to share a common drink with generous spirits. So that heartwarming part of wine, I felt last year was part of wine's story that was not being told. And I loved the idea, the rhyme, because I'm a writer, of Come Over October. So I and two colleagues launched Come Over October, in a sense, a hope and a prayer. And amazingly enough, by the end of October, we had reached 1.7 billion impressions in
Wow.
print and digital media, 4.6 million posts on social media, more than 1,000 stores around the United States did Come Over October promotions. Those stores had, during that month, a 10 million person traffic. And so Come Over October was hugely successful, which is why we will do it again this year and hopefully for many years. Also this spring, starting in April 1st, we are launching a spring campaign, a sister campaign to Come Over October. It's called Share and Pair Sundays, where every Sunday we encourage consumers to just invite some friends or a neighbor or a colleague or a family member to come over and share some wine and a few bites. It could be popcorn and Pinot Grigio, right? Now, I don't mean technical Culinary Institute of America pairing, as much as just, again, this in honor of wine's historic, social, and cultural role as a beverage that brings people together, to celebrate that. And as we all know, that idea of spending a little bit of time on a Sunday to be together, to be connected in a world that right now is so digitized and so isolated often, is almost a categorically good thing, I think.
Yeah, as a retailer, I thank you for all that, bringing the attention to helping retailers too. I appreciate it.
It's important to us. And I personally cannot imagine a world without wine because it brings so much joy and togetherness to people. So I'm very happy to promote that. And by the way, I have no wine to sell. I'm not a winery owner. I don't make a wine, but I, as a researcher, can tell you about the historical threads of the contributions wine has made to society and culture. And by the way, of course, I should say that we're talking about moderate wine consumption. We're not talking about alcohol abuse. We're not talking about medical issues. Come Over October was not a medical campaign. It was a social campaign for adults, not children, and for adults who enjoy wine with food.
Yeah, there certainly has been a lot of talk and conversation lately about the health benefits or not health benefits of alcohol and wine and all of that. And it certainly has been a topic of conversation within the industry and with consumers as well. I know we do field a lot of questions about wine and health and moderation and are often asked about our opinions about health benefits of wine.
You know, Kim, if I can interject here, one
Sure.
thing that really is concerning to me is that discussion of the health benefits or lack thereof of alcohol, right, misses a very important point, and that is that wine is more than alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
If all you wanted was the alcohol hit, there are faster and cheaper ways to get it than to buy that Brunello for dinner or that Napa Cabernet to have on the weekend. No, seriously, wine is, of course, threaded into this rich tapestry of religion and art and history and culture. And so I do think that the discussion, by reducing wine to merely a discussion about alcohol, erases centuries of tradition. And that's not the wine industry I know.
Did you start the Come Over October movement because you're worried about the wine industry? Because, I mean, lately now the Surgeon General's come out, as Kim has said, with these cancer warnings. Younger people are not taking to drinking wine. Big brands seems to be getting bigger. There's climate change issues. What worries you about the wine industry?
Yeah, I disagree with a few of those points, Mark. There is a substantial body of information research rather, that shows that young adults begin adopting wine more in their 30s than in their 20s. And remember that the current generation that came of age, able to drink alcohol, came of age during COVID. And COVID put an unusual spin on all kinds of things, as we all know. It changed all of our lives in various and different ways. But for young people who came of drinking age, during COVID, haven't really seen what is going to happen there. We don't know. But we do know this. At about age 30, and there are lots and lots of studies showing this, wine drinking begins to take hold. It may have to do with having more disposable income. It may have to do with people being married and now they're home and they're cooking and not so much going out to parties and drinking cocktails. We don't know, but we do know that around age 30, many people begin to adopt wine. So the idea that, oh my God, the sky is falling in, young people are not drinking wine, I think it's an erroneous conclusion. I think you have to look at how different ages progress in their drinking habits, which is a much more complex story than simply taking a snapshot of what 22-year-olds are doing right now and then predicting where the wine industry is going by virtue of that single snapshot in time. Wine is not a photograph, it's a movie. Right? It's
Right.
moving constantly. So there's that. The Surgeon General's report really made me despondent, and I think made the wine industry equally despondent.
Mm-hmm.
It came almost, well, it didn't really come out of the blue, but it was shocking when it came out.
Yeah.
In January. And it, of course, was enormously frightening. Anything that says X gives you cancer would be terrifying. You know, what if it said chocolate gives you cancer or breakfast cereals give you cancer? I mean, the big cancer word makes all of us rightfully uncomfortable. What is sad about that, really sad and surprising for the Surgeon General of all people, is that, let me just get this, I want to be sure I say this name right. That's right. The National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, known by its acronym NASEM, is the official body of scientists whose research looks at everything in current research in the last few years written about alcohol, not just about wine, but about alcohol and health, alcohol and wellness. It's NASEM's work that in part will inform the new dietary guidelines for Americans. NASEM, again, the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, came out in January, right after the Surgeon General, also surprised, and their word was that with moderate certainty, that was their term, with moderate certainty, they could say that people who drank alcohol in moderation had a lower level of all-cause mortality, meaning they could die from anything and everything, than people who did not drink alcohol. So, you know, I guess again, I say the alarmist phrase by the Surgeon General was certainly unwarranted and not based on a careful review of the research. So the wine industry, and me too, I mean, every journalist who covers this was so surprised because it was really unbalanced and it seemed so definitive. And the Surgeon General, you would think doctors are usually much more careful and conditional. Like X may be true if Y and Z are also true, or in ABC kinds of situations, then you should watch out. But this was just a flat statement, which is not supported, in fact, by the current medical research.
Wild.
Very wild.
Yeah.
I was thinking when I saw it that it seems over the years, I was kind of shocked that the bigger corporations in the wine and liquor industry kind of losing power out there, of kind of pushing this stuff back. You wouldn't see stuff like this years ago.
No, I think there are 10,660 wineries in the United States. 10,660. That's a lot of wineries. Also, I think one of the sad things about the reporting and the anti-alcohol bias of so much reporting is that everyone thinks it's like big A alcohol industry. It's 10,660 mostly families, mostly small families who employ 1.8 million people and pay $258 billion in taxes every year. That's what the wine industry is, a highly fragmented collection of small family wineries. Yes, of course, there is Gallo. There are a couple of big companies. We know that. But even Gallo is a family winery after all. It's a big family winery, of course. But sometimes we forget how much the wine industry is woven into the economies of rural communities in America, just as it is in Europe. There are many rural communities in America whose lifeblood is producing small amounts of wine that usually don't fly around the world or anything else. They are local small businesses. And that is I think in the big discussion about alcohol, capital A, we forget who are we talking about here? We're talking about small families many times.
Yeah, I think people don't really understand. That's something Kim and I try to say all the time in this show is, the support in the little people, and that they're smaller versus bigger. And a lot of people just don't understand that or get educated or look or research what they're drinking to find out who they're supporting. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
Especially because our market, we're not in Massachusetts. We have a few wineries. We don't have a whole lot of our own local produce to consume. So we are consuming wines from other places. And I think we have less of a connection in that regard to the small nature of wine. We certainly have more of I would feel like a connection to, say, our craft beer brewers because we have so many breweries around here, but more of a disconnect from actual people who are making the wine that we might be drinking or somebody else.
But you are a very good wine market. And
we are.
It's a little known fact, Kim. I was born in Quincy,
nice.
Massachusetts, just
Wow.
outside Boston. Yes. I can hear the Boston accent in both of your voices.
It's there a little bit.
And we're country people too. We're well outside the city.
Country people.
So Karen, the next edition of the Wine Bible, will you be putting anything about the Come Over October, or will you work in non-alcoholic products into the book? Because I didn't notice any non-alcoholic in the book.
No, with Come Over October, we had lots of wine companies. I donated all of my time to it, as did my two co-founders. But in order to have the kind of impact and reach we did to develop the website, the logo, etc., lots of wine companies and small family wineries donated small amounts of money to us, including to cover hard costs, including non-alcoholic wines, because non-alcoholic wines are still wines after all. And there may be times, either during the week or one doesn't even need a reason, that you just want to be drinking a wine without alcohol in it. So there's no sense in which we feel like, oh, no, you have to drink wine with whatever, 14% alcohol. No, people want to drink non-alcoholic wine. It's totally fine. And as an aside, non-alcohol wines are getting better and better. As we all know, if you tasted one maybe 5 years ago, it was hard to find one that you really fell in love with. But the technology, and in fact, a lot of the technology for de-alcoholizing wine is coming out of Germany and Italy, where non-alcoholic wine, good non-alcoholic wine, has been made now for a number of years. And those wines are coming onto retail shelves in greater numbers now, which is great because choice is what it's all about, right? It's about coming together, whether you have, and maybe you have a glass of Chardonnay and the person next to you has a glass of who knows what, Sauvignon Blanc with no alcohol in it. It doesn't matter. It's about being together.
Right. Well, thank you, Karen. I think Kim and I could talk to you all day and ask you wine. I had a million Italy questions I had to hit up with you, but some other time.
Yeah,
We
Mark
really,
loves Italy.
we really
And I'm the
appreciate
champagne guru, so I would just want to talk to you about champagne all the time.
There you go. Well, I welcome if any of your listeners want to sort of see what I'm up to every week. My digital newsletter, Wine Speed, is super fun. It comes to your inbox every Friday, and you can subscribe to it just by going to winespeed.com. A very popular item is the weekly wine quiz. So I encourage the both of you to think about that, because I tell you, like every Saturday, I get emails saying, I got the wine quiz right. So for any wine lover, it's really fun. And you don't have to be a pro in the business. You just have to love wine. And I think you'd love it.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much. And we thank you
Yes,
for
thank you.
everything you do for wine and your passion for wine. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Say hi to Massachusetts for me.
We will do that.
Thank you both.
Thank you for joining us today on The Wonderful World of Wine. We've been your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Today, our special guest has been Karen MacNeil, author of The Wine Bible. For more information about Karen, you can go to her websites, KarenMacNeil.com, winespeed.com, or comeoveroctober.com. For more information about Kim, you can go to her website, CommonwealthWineschool.com. For more information about myself, you can go to FranklinLiquors.com. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to us on our Facebook page, The Wonderful World of Wine, and our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio. Cheers.
Cheers.
Wine, wine.